Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're hosting the sixth session of the IEM Knowledge Series. To all our founders attending today, I'm sure you'll are spending an incredible amount of time, energy, and resources in building a great product. Much needed, given that is your primary offering to your customers. But I'd just like to say that while building a good product is important, it is not the only ingredient for successful growth. Many factors play a role, and two important factors are opting for the right business model and subsequently tracking the right metrics. So, when we talk about revenue models, often founders find themselves in a dilemma. Say you've built a software product, and how do you charge your customers? Do you license it out to them? Do you offer it out as a subscription? Do you charge them based on their usage? Or maybe opt for a hybrid model of some of the options mentioned previously. So similar questions are asked, arise from founders across different other types of businesses as well. So we hope to help clarify them through today's session. Metrics actually as well play a very critical role throughout the life cycle of your business. So of course, you would be tracking a certain set of metrics at the early stage and slightly different metrics as you scale and grow your venture. But overall, they help you assess the progress made toward achieving your company's goals. But we have to be mindful, right? Because merely tracking some metrics doesn't necessarily always provide an accurate indicator of the performance of your venture. Opting for the right metrics and calculating them accurately is what will eventually help you get a good understanding of the performance of your business. So that's what our session focuses on today. We will begin with some introductory remarks and give you a good overview of both these topics. And then, of course, we've kept ample time for answering any questions that you may have. So please feel free, as and when you do have questions, leave them via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be more than happy to answer them towards after the introductory remarks. So. I'm Kanchi Daya from the Indian Angel Network, and joining us today is Mr. Alok Mittal, the co-founder and CEO of Indify, a platform that expands access to debt financing for Indian SMEs. He is also the co-founder of Indian Angel Network, and earlier in 1999, he co-founded jobsahead.com, which was a leading e-recruitment business focused on the Indian market. I'm sure many of you know that it was later acquired by Monster.com. So Mr. Alok Mittal actually needs no introduction, but he is an active angel investor and is extremely passionate about creating value through startups in India. So thank you, Mr. Alok, for your precious time today. We truly appreciate it. To begin this session, it would be great, if you could introduce some of the key business models and the metrics that can help founders track progress against each of those models.
Thank you so much, Kanchi, for the kind introduction. Just wanted to check, is our chat open for everyone?
The chat is in the Q&A tab.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to try and use that Q&A tab, not just for Q&A, but just to make this session a little bit more interactive. So would request all the participants to feel free to use that. And I'm going to raise some questions where I would love to get inputs from all of you. Sometimes the Zoom webinars can be very, very boring if they are one way. So first, I think that the session is about business models. Just wanted to get views from people on what do you think a business model entails. So what is part of a business model? What questions are you looking to answer? When you say, this is my business model. Just feel free to type into the Q&A tab. Just whatever you think should be part of a business model. Yeah, so we will go through metrics, but the metrics is how do we know we are making progress? The business model is, the why of it. So what are the underlying drivers? So Varun has mentioned, monetization, market size, traction. Yeah. Anything else that should be part of our business model?
So look, I've just enabled chat for the panel, for the audience as well, so they can surely use the chat box.
Okay, so let's use the chat then. Yes, paying customers, model which helps generating revenues, sales channels, yeah, all of that. Who are the customers? What is the GTM? What's the revenue model? Yeah. So yeah, all of this is part of the business model. Of course, there are tools like Business Model Canvas, which allow you to get a glimpse of all of this in one screen. Now, there are some things here like traction or ARR, right? Those are metrics. Those are not the business model, right? So think about the business model as the key questions that the business must answer in order to prove its long-term viability and differentiation, right? So one, who is your customer? Your business model should very clearly answer who are you targeting. What is your value proposition to the customer, right? Why should the customer buy your goods or services, right? How do you produce your goods and services? What does it cost you? If you are in manufacturing business, then what does it cost you to produce that output that you're going to sell? If you're in services business, then what does it cost you to provide that service to the customer? How do you make money, right? So what is your revenue model? How are you going to price the product? Is it going to be freemium, where you say, let everyone come in, we're going to offer them something for free, and then we are going to upgrade? Or is it going to be subscription, right? So these are all examples of revenue models. And you have to decide how you're going to price. So the value proposition and the pricing has to fit in, right? There is a certain value that the customer ascribes to your product, and there is a certain amount of money they are willing to pay you in a certain mode. So these things are interlinked with each other. The question of distribution, right? How do you sell your product? How do you market your product? Why there's mentioned, is online or offline the best way of doing it, right? And then how do you build and sustain competitive advantage, right? So for example, you know, the tea shop in front of my office has a business model, right? There is a target customer, that's me. There's a value prop. I need to have a cup of tea, you know, 3 times a day. His costing is well below his pricing. All that is great, right? But the value of that business is merely the cash that that person generates every day, right? Tomorrow, if there's another chaiwala who comes in and opens a stall next to him, that new chai shop will take up part of his business, right? So there's very little defense. And that must be an integral part of our thinking when we think about what is a business model, right? So we'll, you know, cover these 4 or 5 things. So who's your customer? What's the value prop? What are they willing to pay? What does it cost you to produce your goods? And in effect, how do these two generate margin? How do you sell and distribute your products? And how do you generate competitive advantage? Right? There could be other elements. Who are your partners, for example? So if you look at the business model canvas construct, there'll be a couple of other elements in there. But suffices to say that the entire architecture of the business is captured in the business model, right? That was interesting. The vada versus the tea. So Siddharth, just hold on to that thought and we'll come back to it. It's not very different from Make My Trip making money through the hotel and not through the airline. Yeah. Yes. So can you please address a situation where you're a person go in between? Yeah. So trading is a business model, right? It has all the same questions to be answered. Who is your customer? The retailer who buys from you. What's your value prop? You know, how much can you fill for them? How convenient is your service? How little can they order from you? How do you produce a good and service? In this case, you don't produce it; you buy it from a distributor or the manufacturer. You make trading margin. You sell by having a feet on street beat system, and you build and sustain competitive advantage through volumes, which gives you cost side benefits, right? So pretty much all the kinds of business models we've seen will fit into one of these. Right? Question number 2, how do we know that we are on track? So now I have a business model, right? And in its full glory, 5 years from now, that will be $1 billion company, right? If I get all of these 6 questions right? I've identified my customers right, I'm pricing it right, I'm delivering it well, right? But between now and that 5 years later, on a day-to-day basis, how do we ensure that we are on the right track? Right? That is where the metrics come in, right? And so it must be obvious by now that a business model is inherently intertwined with the metrics that can help us as entrepreneurs assess our progress on that business model, right? My goal is that I want to climb the Everest, right? That's going to take me 10 years. How do I make sure that I have a metric that allows me to track my progress every day so that 6 years into the journey, I don't realize that I'm underprepared. I can realize that as soon as it happens. So metrics are the guides to the eventual outcome that we are looking at. And the kind of metrics you choose are inherently linked to the business model that you have, right? So why don't we just take a short quiz, and Kanchi, if you can project the first quiz. And what we are going to start with is just get a little bit of show of hands on what is the revenue model that you are deploying in your company, right? And all of these represent elements of different business models, right? These are obviously not full business models. You could have a advertising business targeted at many different kind of customers, right? But these are revenue models that form the heart of your business model. And each of them will then get linked to different progress metrics. But as the first question, just take your time and try to outline what your business model is. If I'm missing some of it here, feel free to choose others. And if that number is large, then we will, through the chat window, try to discover more about that. Yeah, transactional and commission is the same thing. So transactional is, I buy a good, I sell a good, right? Or service. So a retailer selling something is same as MakeMyTrip selling a ticket, and hence making a commission on that. Subscription is where a customer comes in, says, I'll pay you something every month. Netflix, Hotstar, Salesforce. Advertising, all of us understand, television channels, Yahoo.com, Google. Platform businesses that have a high engagement platform which keeps on getting users back quickly, and then they will want to sell multiple things on top of that. Freemium, free funnel and then conversion to paid. Rishabh, at this point, I will request you to just choose one that applies the best. And then in any case, we will go and discuss multiple of these. So hopefully we will, cover the elements behind each of these. Sheil did not understand your question. What will be the lump sum project cost? If that is an offer for consulting to me, write to me privately. Okay, Kanchi, whenever we are done with this, we can let the poll go and then we can see what the results are. Okay, so 38% of the people, everyone can see this results, right? Yeah. 38% of the people are in transactional, so e-commerce, online travel, buying and selling stuff. 29% subscription, that's an impressive number. 11% platform, 9% freemium, and then we got some in the others and some in advertising. I'm actually surprised that advertising is so low. When I look at my inbound funnel for investments, I see a lot more advertising there. So that is fine. Advertising is a challenging business. Siddharth, if you total up the numbers in the brackets, at about 90, I would say. So 90 people have responded to this survey. It's possible there are some more who haven't, but that gives you a ballpark. If it facilitates a trade between buy and sell, will it be a platform? Not really. More often than not, e-commerce businesses have tended to be transactional and not really platform-like. So if you want to look at platform businesses, one thing to think about is number of products per customer, right? And not products in the sense today I sold a phone, tomorrow I'll sell a cover, but fundamentally different products, right? So if you start to look at Paytm, payments is one product, right? E-commerce is another product. FASTag is another product, right? So any of these businesses can land up being a platform business, but very few actually get in that stage where they've got very high engagement with customers. B2B will have all of these models, right? There can be transactional models in B2B. There can be platform models in B2B. Think about LinkedIn. There can be subscription models, SaaS businesses in B2B. So actually the way I have outlined these revenue models, they can apply to B2B, they can apply to B2C. Book My Show, is that really a platform model? I don't know. In the sense that I only go to Book My Show when I need to book a movie ticket, right? And if it's that specific, then I would hazard call it a transactional business like a Flipkart would, rather than considering it as a platform model. So I think the platform models do cause a lot of confusion because many platforms don't start as platforms. Okay, but some of the test in my mind will be, are you looking at a daily use case? Is the customer coming to you for multiple reasons? And are you able to sell multiple product categories to the customer? So very high engagement. Amazon is interesting because Amazon started as a transactional business, right? But it has tried very, very hard to get to a platform business model. So if you look at Amazon Prime, that was its transition into trying to become a platform model, right? So Prime gave me free shipping on Amazon orders, but it also gave me the video platform where I could go and do things every day. And especially in India with Amazon Pay, I think that's their second significant step towards becoming a platform business. So Amazon, and I have been an Amazon customer for 20 years now. Clearly the model that has transitioned over time from being a transactional business to being much more of a platform business. Yeah. How can we measure and structure our value proposition? We'll come to that in a moment. So I think business model wise, this is how far I'll go right now. And let's jump right into our next question. What are the metrics for your business? Yeah. So again, if you guys want to use the chat window, feel free to use the chat window to specify some key metrics that you think you are using for your business. And then I want you to think about why are you using that metric? What does that denote? What is the purpose behind that metric? So there is one answer, NPS, Net Promoter Score. So essentially it tells you how willing are your customers to refer you to other prospects. To full bad customer experience. What is that metric? I don't understand that metric. Profit, customer reach, versatility. I will take versatility to mean what are the different things you can do. And I would be very keen to understand why that is a metric. What is the intent behind that metric? GMV, average order size, great. I still don't understand why average order size. DAU upon MAU, right? Average contract value, ARR, number of customers for a SaaS business. Again, interesting one. Exclusivity, revenue per customer. Let's go to the intent. Okay. So when you are going after these metrics, what is the intent in your mind? Why are you measuring CAC? Why are you measuring loyalty? There's something called middle line. Why are you measuring churn rate? Right? Because even in the chat window, you would have seen about 25 metrics already mentioned. And so how do you decide what is right for you? So why don't we do this? Let's get to our second poll. to get a sense of which are the popular metrics. And by no means I've got a list of 20 here, but I will put down some 10 odd metrics for you to choose from. By no means is this comprehensive. This is a multi-select, so feel free to select more than one if you'd like to. That's an interesting one. Someone says impact on bottom of pyramid. So very interesting metric. How do you measure employee satisfaction on a monthly basis? Yeah. So Pramod, if you can just park that question, but please do come back to that question. We've tried some tools there which we are very happy with. So I'll be happy to chat about that. But why don't we focus on the poll right now and just kind of list down the metrics that we are currently tracking in our businesses. And Kachi, whenever you think we've given enough time, we can take this off and we can put back the results. Operating leverage, very interesting, Madhu. We'll come back to that one. Okay, so no surprises. Sales is a big one. Bookings, customer satisfaction. Customer acquisition cost, customer repeat rate, direct cost of delivery, employee satisfaction. Very few people on operating leverage, asset intensity, and I can understand why. So for many of the businesses, those are not the relevant parameters, right? But now I want to think about what are you really measuring, right? These are the metrics. What broad category are you trying to cover when you think about any of these metrics? What are you trying to ensure? Go back to your business model. So with respect to your business model, what is it that you're trying to ascertain, right? What did we have in the business model? Who's your customer? What is the value prop to them? How will you make money? What is your cost? Hence, how profitable will you be? What is your competitive moat? Right? Those were the questions in the business model. Try to draw that linkage between these metrics and that business model to say, why are you putting these metrics down? And you can use the chat window again. So one is my business model is relevant and sustainable in the long term. Absolutely. Okay, will it give a scale or not? Important, right? So you may measure things not because they're going to lead to this month's or this quarter's revenue, but because they denote scalability over time. Impact created. This is an interesting one. And the question often is, why do you care about that? Now, there are certain businesses which are able to quantify the importance of impact in their business model, right? So one can be a notion of, are we impacting our customers the way we want to, right? Which is a direct question of, are customers deriving value out of our product or not, right? Second can be, are we causing the right impact in the broader society around us? Think about a university, right? Third can be, are we being responsible in our behavior, right? Carbon neutrality. So those things can be part of a business model, and especially as we move forward, they're becoming more and more important. And interestingly enough, they are becoming monetizable, right? So the notion of impact used to sit outside of the notion of how do I make money. But as we move forward, these two are integrating more and more. So that's an interesting one. Measuring against target, interesting, but really, this is like a circle, right? I set the target, I set the metric, I set the target, I set the metrics. What is the purpose? Have a reality on amount of cash burn. What is the investment needs of the business, right? How do we know business health? Profit. Okay. So let me propose 4 key reasons why metrics should be there, right? And what kind of metrics should be there. Clearly, one of the goals of the business is to make money, right? So your metrics should indicate the potential to make money. Okay. For people who are running pure social enterprises, you can substitute that notion of cash profit to your notion of impact on the customer or on the society, right? The second is to create a strong customer franchise. Okay, so loyalty of customers, am I adding enough value to customers? All of those would be to create a strong franchise brand. Right? Third is to create scale over time, right? And also to answer what can be the barriers to scale. And fourth is to create competitive moats, right? Differentiation. Okay. So by and large, those are the four buckets in which most metrics will start to fall, right? Financial profitability, customer value and satisfaction, scale, and uniqueness. Okay. So if we start to go through most of the things we've been saying, COGS, gross profit, all of those will start to fall under the financial metrics. Things like NPS, am I adding value to my customer or not, are all the customer franchise questions. Scale, I did not see a lot of inputs on scale. We will discuss some of those. And then differentiation, right? So those are the four broad categories, and let's start to fill in some of these broad categories. So I think I should use a whiteboard, and then all I'm going to do is to start to fill some of these in. Share screen. Let's get to a whiteboard. Okay, I hope my whiteboard is visible. And so here we go, right? So we had some business models, right? So we had transactional, then we had subscription, then we had advertising, platform, freemium, and for now we'll stay here. And then we had the metrics drivers, profitability, customer franchise, and scale. Okay, so we'll stay with these ones. This is, where is scale? So this is illustrative. Whoops. Okay, and we are going to start to fill in some of these blank spaces. Okay, so now let's look at a transactional business, and let's think about what are the metrics we need to populate to be able to assess the financial viability of a transactional business. Any ideas? So I'm in a transactional business now, which means I buy goods and I sell goods or services. What should I measure to ensure that I'm on the right path as far as the financial viability is concerned? Yes, so gross margin, extremely important, and many of you would have seen that sometimes these gross margins are split into various levels. So someone had asked the question about there are different metrics at different stage of the business, and you're right? So you might have seen at various times contribution margin 1, then contribution margin 2, right? Now the reason for that is because at a very early stage of the business, suppose you're starting a company today and you're buying and selling, the first thing you want to make sure is that you are selling the good for more than what you are purchasing it at, right? That is typically referred to as contribution margin 1. Then there is a CM2, which says, okay, but I also need to cover my delivery costs. Now, on day one, you might not be covering your delivery costs, but as you get to day 200, the idea will be to have enough scale when your delivery costs start to get covered, right? And then at some point, you want to start to cover your marketing costs, right? So it is possible that you want to define gross margins at several different layers, depending on the stage of the business you're in. And then progressively go from one level of profitability to another level of profitability. Right? Someone mentioned average order value, right? Now, why was that important? Because many times, many of these costs ultimately will get amortized on revenue. And that depends on what the average order value is, right? If I've got 200 rupee average order value and my product margin is 40%, that is very different from 800 rupee order value and 40% product margin, because my overheads, shipping cost, for example, might be 50 rupees a unit, right? If it's a sales driven business, then sales productivity will be part of this bucket, right? So in case of a transactional business, those would be some of the ways of measuring the profit potential. And hence, those are the metrics that you will start to track on a daily basis to make sure that you are heading towards the right business model. Now, it's important to also use the same metrics in building up your business plan, right? So your business plan should not just talk about revenue and salaries, right? You should structure your business plan to incorporate these metrics so that you know where do you need to get to on your business plan, and then you are tracking on a daily basis where are you landing. So your whole business and operations planning becomes part of your financial plan. Okay, let's go to another business model and see what are the different metrics we might track for that as far as the profit pool is concerned. So let's go to subscription business. And what are the metrics that you would track if you did not have a transactional but a subscription business, but you're still focused on the profitability goal? LTV, okay, full form, lifetime value. And why do we track LTV for subscription but not for transactions? MRR, yeah. LTV CAC ratio. So do you see this? As we move from a transactional business to a subscription business, suddenly our metrics to track the same objective, which is profitability, are changing. Okay, and that is where the inherent difference between the business model lies. The notion of a transactional business model is I've acquired a customer, the customer will come and transact, give me some margin on that transaction, then go away. Okay, and then when I wake up tomorrow morning, I will run again, I'll acquire a customer, right? Not to say that repeats won't happen, and we'll come to how to handle repeats in a transactional business. But this is very different from the underlying assumption of a subscription business, right? Which is saying that my whole business is built around customers sticking around. Now, for that purpose, I will not just measure the transaction value of a customer, but the lifetime value of a customer. Okay. Now, what is the downside of measuring the transaction value and not the LTV? Why in a subscription business I should not measure transactional revenue, but I should measure lifetime value? Any idea? How will you go wrong if you measure transaction value instead of subscription value? Yeah. So someone has suggested because cost of acquisition is higher, right? So let's take an example. Suppose my transaction business model has 1,000 rupee revenue, 200 rupee cost, 300 rupees of customer acquisition cost, right? In a transactional business, I'm saying I've got 500 rupees margin, I'm good to go, right? And the core assumption is that tomorrow when I want another 1,000 rupee transaction, I'll spend that 300 rupee again, or maybe I'll spend 200 rupees again because this was an existing customer. In a subscription business, you turn this on its head. You say, no, I'm going to spend 10,000 rupees to acquire this customer, right? and is going to pay me 2,000 rupees a month, but it's going to stick around for 10 months, right? So the lifetime revenue becomes 20,000 rupees, and my cost of acquisition is 10,000 rupees, right? Now, remember that if you were looking at this like a transactional business, that this person will come in and give me 2,000 rupees of revenue, I have to spend 10,000 rupees to acquire the customer, you would never run that business, right? So if you run a subscription business with transactional metrics, you will end up under investing in the business. Okay. So the role of metrics in clarifying your business model is to help you make the right choices of where to invest, where not to invest, right? And choosing a metric which is suitable for one business in another business can make you either overinvest or underinvest. If you treat a transactional business like a LTV business, right, then the risk is that you spend too much to acquire the customer, and then most customers are not returning back, right? So there is the risk in switching metrics across business models, both ways. There's an upside risk and there is a downside risk. How is CV to CAC ratio important in a transactional revenue model? CV being, Anirban, can you tell us what do you mean by CV? Customer value, same as LTV. So here's the deal. I have seen multiple businesses on the transactional side come in and claim an LTV, right? The reality is LTV in a transactional business is visible fairly late in the stage of the company. So at least for the first 3 to 4 years, you don't really know what the LTV is going to be. And there are a couple of different reasons for that. One, in a transactional business, your distribution model keeps changing as you grow the business. So when you started an e-commerce company, you might be acquiring a lot of customers through organic search, right? When you started to scale it up, you might start to use SEM, search engine optimization, right? And the impact of that is that these different customers come with different behavior, and their lifetime value can be very, very different. Okay. So for example, I run a lending business. We get customers who borrow from us. We could technically do a lifetime value model today because we have repeat rates available, right? But we have chosen not to because we don't want to take that risk today of saying this customer is going to come to me thrice, hence I overpay for acquiring and they don't come in, right? And we are in the 5th year of our journey. Okay. So potentially now we are going to start to look at whether our repeat data is reliable enough to get to a LTV model or not. Okay. So it's not that the LTV model is not relevant to the transaction model. It just appears fairly late in the day because your cycle of repeat can be very, very slow. In a subscription business, the customer is sticking with you every month. So every month you are generating a data point on how many customers churned versus not. In a transactional business, let's say I'm buying a car. I'm going to buy my next car 8 years from now, right? I have no clue on what the repeat rate is going to be. So maybe in the 12th year of my existence, I'll have a better idea. And I'm taking an extreme example to illustrate the difference. There will be examples which are transactional but high frequency, and there you might be able to apply some of the LTV logic. Yeah. Advertising. What would you watch out for in advertising as far as profitability is concerned? Or why don't we skip advertising with only 3% of the people who wanted to do that? And maybe we can go to platform. In platform businesses, what are the metrics you would deploy to ensure that you are on the right path as far as profitability is concerned? Yeah, I don't understand versatility. So if Dr. Agarwal can explain that to me, that'll be useful. Yeah, but cross usage and cross sell is a big metric, right? Number of products per customer is a big metric in platform, because the idea is that this customer is coming to me on a continuous basis. So let's take Paytm as an example of a platform business, right? The customer is coming to me on a daily basis because they want to make payments. Payments doesn't generate money for me, right? But now what are the 3 other things that I can sell to the customer which will make money for me? And normally the 3 other things that you are selling are again micro transactions, right? So can I sell them a book and make 20 rupees of that book? Can I sell them a FASTag and get 10 rupees on the FASTag, right? So that is the characteristic of a platform business. So actually the onboarding cost per user in a platform business should be very, very low, right? So the product should solve for customer acquisition. So literally you should be talking about single digit rupee onboarding costs, but massive scale, right? So here you will not count into thousands of users or 10,000 of users, you want millions of users, okay? So massive scale, very low onboarding cost, and then you may call it cross-sell, attach rate. Essentially, your ability to sell more and more products to the same customer is at the heart of a platform-based business model. Yeah. Keeping cost to customer is low. Yeah. So I think that goes across, and that is a gross margin question. The more you customize, the more is your cost of delivery, and hence your gross margin will fall across business models. So if I'm customizing e-commerce, which means that I am selling hand knitted sweaters, right? Now that will have a high cost of delivery. If I'm customizing software all the time, it will have a high cost of delivery. Platform marketing costs, absolutely. So as I said, the goal of platform businesses will be to get their customer acquisition cost very, very low. That can be done. So suppose I want to keep my cost of customer onboarding as 7 rupees. And I want to acquire 10 million customers, right? That's $1 million in marketing spend, right? So here the variable cost of acquiring customers will be kept low, but you may incur fixed expenses, which allow you to get high reach and get a lot of people on the platform. But product is an inherent solve of platform businesses. The fact that a Paytm kind of a business has payments as its core, which is a 5 times a day use case, is not coincidental, right? In other words, it's hard to build a platform business selling cars, right? So that notion of frequency and engagement has to be product driven rather than marketing driven. Yeah, so IndiaMart kind of directory business, mostly advertising, right? And the reason I classify that as advertising is because there is a high upfront cost in creating the audience. The audience in case of IndiaMart is all the lead buyers. Okay. And then once you have a lot of lead buyers, you have the ability to monetize those buyers by getting people who want to sell leads or sell advertising on top of that, right? Now, IndiaMart is doing a couple of other things now, payments included. But the core of IndiaMart business looks very much like advertising business. Okay, so I just want to spend a few minutes on another vertical, let's say customer franchise. And there some of the metrics that got mentioned were NPS. But some of the other metrics that are equally important there would be, for example, customer cohorts. So in transactional business, as well as SaaS businesses, how many of your customers are you retaining month on month? And are they increasing in value per month or reducing in value per month are very core metrics, right? So in these businesses, you normally want growing vintage cohorts. What that means is if I got 100 customers in the first month, right, and they did 100 rupees of transaction in the first month, in the 6th month, I might be left with only 50 customers. But those 50 customers should be growing ones, so that aggregate transactions are more than 100 rupees. Infinite cohort value, right? That is what we are shooting for in our subscription or SaaS business. That's what makes a SaaS business more valuable, right? Yeah, the way you get to finite LTV is because customers average customer reduces their spending on the platform over time. But if you take Twitter, for example, and you take time spent on the network, a customer who comes in continues to spend more and more time over the vintage, not less and less. Okay. And that is the power of that business model. So in advertising businesses, time spent on site is the currency. That's the important metric as far as customers are concerned, because they're not transacting. right? Similarly, in SaaS business, revenue retention is a big factor, and revenue retention doesn't have to be lesser than 100%. It can be more than 100%, right? Because customers who stay are buying more and more. Yeah. And then we have this third dimension of scale potential, which some of you pointed out, some of you ignored, which are things like asset intensity, right? So what is it that can inhibit scale in the business? In advertising business, what could be the scaling metric? What ensures scale in an advertising business? Repeat usage, because your audience has to come back again and again. Okay. What kind of a brand are you generating? Does that pull people in? Yeah. Cash intensity. Advertising businesses have very long collection cycles. Yeah. Similarly, in e-commerce business, inventory is a scale limiter, right? Distribution scale. How are you acquiring your customers? How much will that scale? Yeah. So those would be examples of scale potential. So let me do this. Let me switch off this sharing, and I had one slide ready to just illustrate what we were talking about, which is kind of the filled version of this chart. Yeah. So again, take this as illustrative. Onto saying for which business model, along what dimension, what are the kind of metrics that one may use, right? And the purpose of putting this out is really to illustrate that, you know, you are really measuring 3 or 4 things only: profit potential, customer franchise, scale potential. I did not put differentiation alongside this, but you can, you know, extend this chart to include differentiation. And then the metrics that you measure are really trying to establish mechanisms to monitor your progress in that business model. So if you pivot and your business model changes, chances are your metrics need to change. Okay. Cool. So I have already spent more time than I would have liked to on the introductory remarks. So why don't we do this? Let's jump straight into questions. And Kanchi, whichever way you want to run it, we can do that.
Sure. So I request all the participants to leave the questions in the Q&A tab, so it'll be easier for us to sort through jumping through both. We'll start picking it up from there. And while the questions start coming in, okay, so we have a question from a founder saying, in a subscription model, which is B2B SaaS, what is more important, revenue or number of customers acquired? And the subscription price goes from 5,000 to 40,000. So the CAC remains the same for every customer. Considering there are other cross-selling, upselling opportunities, the idea is to engage the customer with all the other options. So yeah, the primary question is important, revenue or number of customers?
No, it does not matter, right? So what are the drivers to this? So there are enterprise SaaS businesses which will go and sell to a customer which can give them 50 lakhs a year, right? And there are SME SaaS businesses which will go and sell for 10,000 rupees, right? So the important thing is not whether higher revenue or higher number of customers, which one wins. The important thing is whether the rest of the business model aligns with it, right? So now you're going to get a certain amount of gross margin per customer, and depending on your repeat rates, you'll get a certain LTV on that customer, lifetime value, right? Now, can you get your cost of customer acquisition, in line with that? If you're selling a low value subscription, then can you scale up and can you get enough number of customers, right? Now, typical metrics around this. Normally, CAC recovery within 12 months is considered to be healthy, right? So if you're spending 10,000 rupees to acquire a customer, you should be able to generate at least 10,000 rupees of gross margin, not revenue, okay, over the first 12 months of the customer's lifetime. The second one that people follow is that your total lifetime value should at least be 3 times of your customer acquisition cost. So the ratio of lifetime value to customer acquisition cost should be at least 3. What that means really is that you're generating enough cash through your existing customers to be able to grow your business without continuously relying on external capital, right? And then on the scale side, you are wanting to build, let's say, $100 million business. Now, if your average customer pays you $100,000 a month or $100,000 a year, then you need at least 1,000 of those customers, and your distribution model must incorporate for that. But if your average customer is paying you only $100 a year, then you want 1 million customers, right? So the scale of your distribution channels must match up to your ambition, given what your average ticket size is. So there is literally no preference on which one to go for, but there is a strong need to align that with other pieces of the business model.
Thank you. So in the B2B contract business, what metrics do they suggest? I mean, do you suggest the founders should focus on?
Sorry, B2B what business? Contract?
You mentioned contract business.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Ashutosh, if you could clarify that in the Q&A tab once more, we'll pick this question up afterwards. For transactional businesses, which is in the marketplace, what must be our focus areas in the first 100 days?
Yeah, I think, see, for the first 100 days, I think the focus for every business is the same. You have a hypothesis on what will create value for customers, and you must prove that hypothesis, right? So a lot of experimentation must happen around what are customers liking, what are they not liking. If you are doing a transactional business like a marketplace, then what goods are they liking? Do they like to purchase a cell phone cover? Do they like to purchase headsets, right? What are the kind of price points that they are biting at? Do they want branded goods? Do they want unbranded goods, right? So a lot of work would have to be done in the initial days around establishing the customer value, which is the hypothesis when you start. So at that time, you know, contribution margin, gross margin, those are less important metrics in the first 100 days.
Okay. The next question is, the founders wanted a little bit more clarity on what's asset intensity and sales force. So
think of asset intensity as basically to create another 100 rupees of revenue, how much capital do you need? Okay. So let's take 2 examples. One is, I offer online classes, right? Let us say we made this webinar paid webinar. Okay. Now to do one more of these webinars, I don't need to deploy any capital, right? So it is a very low asset intensity business, which means I can bootstrap this business. I can keep growing this. I can't market a lot. If I spend a lot in marketing, then that becomes asset intensive. I need capital, right? But if I want to grow it slowly, I can grow it forever. Okay. As against, let's say we want to drill and sell oil, right? I first need to set up an oil rig, huge amount of capital to go in, and then output starts to come. So high degree of asset intensity, you want a lot of funding to power that, right? Now, if less asset intensive businesses are better, then why does anyone open an oil rig? Any questions? Any suggestions? There must be something good about asset intensive businesses. High returns, potentially. Long-term vision. I don't know whether asset intensity is a function of vision. Barrier to entry, absolutely, right? So those businesses will not attract 50 other people. Remember when TikTok got banned, suddenly we had 50 clones of TikTok next day, right? Less asset intensity. Okay. So yeah, you can have high barriers to entry, and hence you can have higher margins in those businesses. Second thing is, once you have put the capital in, okay, then the operational leverage is very good. Okay, so let's take the same example. If I have to do one more webinar, I have to put my own one more hour of time. So my variable cost is very high, even though my fixed cost was 0. Okay, so it's very good in the beginning, but it's very hard to scale because I can't keep putting more and more variable cost, and my profit margin will always remain 10%. Right? Whereas things that have a high upfront investment, later you can amortize that investment, which means your variable cost of now producing, you've already paid for your investments earlier. And hence the profitability later can be higher. And your what is called operational leverage. If I need to incrementally grow the business, how much margin can I generate on incremental business can be very, very high, like a telecom network, right? Every new connection that I sell is very high margin. So those are the positive characteristics of asset intensive businesses.
Thank you. So Ashutosh, just picking up from the contracts question that he had asked earlier, he's clarifying and saying that let's say you sign a contract with a B2B customer or for years, right? Or sometimes you have a contract with the government. So the question is the delivery period of product is generally a year or more. So in these kind of businesses, which metrics should they measure to define growth?
Yeah. So this is like a transactional business. You will measure sales, right? But because delivery is over an extended period, you will pay a lot of attention to how much of the project have you delivered, right? So, financial folks will call this revenue recognition, but it's not just a financial concept, it's a business concept, right? So suppose someone paid me 1 lakh rupees for delivering a contract over the next 12 months, right? I said, great, I got 1 lakh rupees, let me go spend that money. Okay. Guess what? I don't have the money now to service that contract for the next 12 months. Okay. So what revenue recognition says is very simple in business terms, is that you can't assume that you have earned that 1 lakh rupee yet. You can only assume that you have earned what you have delivered. So if you have delivered 20% of the service, assume you have earned 20,000 rupees. Go do with that 20,000 rupees what you want to do, but reserve the other 80,000 rupees to be able to serve rest of the contract. Right? Now you can tweak this according to your own algorithm. You can say, to service rest of it will not cost me 80,000 rupees, it will cost me 30,000 rupees. But that is the concept that you need to keep in mind. So project execution and delivery becomes a very significant metric there. And what is their outstanding liability, right? It is sometimes called deferred revenue. There are various accounting terms for that, but that becomes an important metric. Other than that, I'm sure you will track project risk itself, right? So you can land up in a different situation. You can say, okay, the customer has committed to pay me 1 lakh rupees, but they will pay me at end of the contract. So I have to invest upfront in executing that contract, right? And hence, what is my execution risk? What is the risk that I'll execute and the customer will not pay after that, right? So those things, collections tracker will become very important in any kind of a contracts business, right? How many days are my sales outstanding? I've delivered, I've invoiced, but the customer hasn't paid, right? So those metrics will be important ones in that kind of a business.
Thank you. The next question is more on cash flow. So the founder is inquiring that why are we not tracking cash flow metrics, or say cash generated every month, so that they get a line of sight on how much they're accumulating.
Yeah. So absolutely, whosoever made that comment, very relevant. The only thing that matters in the business is cash, other than the fundamentals of the business, right? So cash flow continues to be the most important tactical metric. Cash flow does not tell you anything about are you in the long term building the business that you want to build, right? So in my previous example, your cash flow would have been positive, which tactically is very good if the customer pays you in advance, right? Or your cash flow might be back-ended. So from a tactical standpoint, it's very, very important that you know what that is, because that determines whether you will survive for the long term or not. Okay. However, if you want to say what is the strength of my business, then 90% of things that you're doing will not get reflected in cash flows. 10% will, because faster cash generation itself is a strong business model characteristic, right? So there is some value to faster cash flows from a business model standpoint, but am I adding enough value to my customers? I don't know, right? Is my cash flow always coming from new customers? My older customers are not coming back. Cash flow doesn't tell you that, right? So cash flow is not a full picture of a business model, even though tactically it's a very important piece of running a startup.
Thank you. The next question is more from a founder who has a recruitment app. So Their revenue generation is through employers, and considering that, does the business model have to be inclined toward employers? For example, if an employee is not allowed to apply for jobs for a particular time, creating value for employers. This would drive more paying customers using this portal. So
yes and no. See, what is the fundamental business model of a recruitment app? It is advertising again, right? You want a lot of job seekers to come to you, right? And then the employers are willing to pay you some fees to access those job seekers, either by searching the database or by putting an advertising, right? So that is the basic business model. Now, if you start to drop friction in path of job seekers, right? So Infosys employee comes in and you say, guys, I can't let you be on the platform because Infosys is a paid employer with me. Okay. Then as your business grows, you are excluding more and more employees outside of the equation. Okay. That's not a great way to think about the business. Okay. So now the question becomes, to what extent are you compromising your audience? And what is the upside? Right? So there is a trade-off here. Right? In an extreme case, it looks very bad. In a case where you say, no, but I can generate $1 million in revenue and only exclude 1% of the people, well, it looks great. Right? So it will be a function of where that trade-off balances out for you. But remember the fundamentals of the business model. Recruitment app is an advertising business model.
Right, thank you. The next one's a fairly pertinent question. We've seen this question come time and again, more in terms of calculating a particular metric. So what are the components that are included in calculating CAC? So CAC, marketing, channel cost, or should they?
So there is only one component in calculating CAC, which is integrity. Right? Entrepreneurs hurt themselves by calculating CAC incorrectly. So what are the games we play with CAC, right? First, there is the external spends. So I'm spending on SEO, I'm spending on SEM. I will say, no, SEO is not part of CAC because SEO to mera investment hai. Right? On SEM, I'll break it up into buckets because this is my regular SEM, this is my experimental SEM. Okay. Then we will say, okay, the guy who's doing SEM is a fixed resource. I will not count that person. Okay. Now, by playing these games, we try to make the picture more attractive for a prospective investor. But we compromise our own view of what is our cost structure and what is our unit profitability. Right? So here's a piece of advice, right? So there are two things that you want to capture. You want to capture functionally where a cost is sitting. So for example, direct marketing, right, is a function. That includes SEO, includes SEM, includes the person who's doing SEO and SEM for you. Okay. And if you refer to a word called contribution margin, then you must incorporate all the direct marketing costs. Right? If you are doing unit economics, then you can do the cost which is incremental. So there you may include only the SEM incremental cost rather than including all of it. So your full P&L will give you a picture of your actual margin structure, and your unit economics can give you a picture of what your variable cost structure is. Right? But anything which will grow with addition of number of customers, you must put that as a variable cost. So suppose you said, no, but I'll have to add 1 person for every 10,000 customers acquired. Incorporate that cost as your direct cost. Otherwise, you will land up confusing yourself. And if you believe that you have hit unit economic positive, when you haven't, and I'm telling you 50% plus companies get into this zone where they think they are unit positive. They are not just marketing it. They genuinely believe they are not. Right? And that takes you down a path of cash burn that you can't come out of.
Right, thank you. The next question is along the similar lines in terms of calculating. So what period would you count for LTV? A year, 3 years?
So depends, right? The simplest formula to LTV is 1 divided by monthly churn. Right? So if you're facing a 50% churn per month, then it's 2 months. If you're facing 25% churn per month, it's 4 months. Right? That's the simplest way of taking it, and you can, whatever it comes out to be, it comes out to be. Normally, if investors are looking at your business, they will tend to cap it at about 3 years, depending on what your business model is, right? So if you're doing large enterprise SaaS, they will give you the benefit of up to 3 years, assuming your underlying data is showing that. Normally, people are not comfortable with betting on much more than that for early stage businesses. Okay. But you as an entrepreneur can take a view on that, right? On how you feel about it. If there is an installed base effect, where it's very hard for your product to be rooted out once you are in, right? You may choose to take a higher LTV. Remember, why are you doing that? You're doing that because that changes your view of how to invest in that account. Okay. So as long as you're using it for the right reason, you can take a differential view. Investors may cap it out at a certain point, but that is fine. That's their assessment of your business.
We have a founder who's curious to know if there's any book or literature which would give them which would be a good starting point for understanding business models in depth.
You know, there are some videos that are out there. Let me see if I can. Kaji, why don't you go ahead with the next question? I'll just try to.
Yeah, and we can leave it in the chat before.
Pull out the link on the chat. Yeah.
All right. So. The next question is.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, great. So Twitter and Quora do not generate revenue for the initial few years and still manage to raise a Series D round. So the question is, do you think similar business models are fundable in India, and how do you suggest a similar business entrepreneur to approach investors?
So, you know, there is evidence of those businesses getting funded in India. It's not unusual. You know, as I mentioned, when TikTok shut down, you saw the spate of people who came up with TikTok loans, and many of them got financed, right? But let's just understand what is the basis of that business model, right? The first basis of that business model is to have a very high engagement service, which can create a large amount, and large amount today for the Indian market means potential to create 50 million or more consumers on a monthly active basis. Okay. Obviously, you're not going to reach there in a month or two, but that is the potential that people are looking for, and they are measuring it by activity level, not customers acquired, but weekly active, monthly active, daily active kind of parameters. The second strong basis of that business is the revenue model, which in the Western geographies has by and large been advertising. Right? Now, unfortunately, the advertising pies in India are not that large. Right? And especially online advertising is almost fully cornered by Google and Facebook ecosystems. Okay, so there is very little online advertising spend that goes to platforms outside of Google and Facebook, and that creates a monetization challenge. Some investors are willing to bear that risk and say that if we create high level of engagement, we'll figure it out. Many investors are still not comfortable with an advertising oriented business model. Then the question becomes, what else are you going to do to monetize that customer base? So those are the core kind of questions around it. But certainly there has been evidence of those kind of models being funded in India now.
All right, thank you. Another question is as an aggregate platform, what should be the primary focus during the pre-investment phase? Revenue or vendors, retailers signing up on their platform?
Yeah, it's a matter of choices. If you have a choice to focus on the customer at an early stage, that has to be the focus. You have to understand what the customer wants from you. Are you delivering it to them? And the reason I say customer instead of saying vendor is because the reason you want to get these vendors are to serve your customer. And if your customer wants fast delivery, you may choose different kinds of vendors relative to if your customer wants the cheapest price. Right? Now, for many of us who are bootstrapping our businesses, revenue is never even a choice. Right? And that's why I said, because you're saying pre-investor, sometimes you might not have a choice but to say, I need to focus on revenue. And if that is the answer, that's the answer. I also think that this has a little bit to do with the choice of business that you choose to get into. Right? If you see that you will have the credibility and the network to go out and raise money at an early stage, you may make a different choice of how you want to start out a business relative to if you don't. Right? So, when I started my current business, I knew that that business will need capital. And so if it can't attract capital, then we are not going to kick this off, right? That was a very clear choice, because in a lending business, if I can't lend money, then there's no customer. But there are fantastic entrepreneurs out of India who have bootstrapped businesses without any external financing, right? And they have done it on a basis that from day zero, they will drive both customer value and revenue. Okay. So there's no clear answer to this. It's a matter of what choices are available on the table.
Thank you. I know you mentioned, it's an interesting point also, especially picking up from our last session, which was on team, where an organization's structure can cater and changes based on the business model that a founder opts for. So what would your recommendations be for founders structuring their company to cater to these business models?
So I think the idea of the business model or structuring and supporting a business model is really kind of coming around 2 or 3 elements, right? You could think of it as departments, right? Functions. You could think of it as how does customer value get created and what is the organization to support that, right? So pretty much the value chain of saying marketing, then product. But product doesn't mean your internal platform. It means also the vendors, because that is creating value for the customer, right? Then customer service and so on. Another useful way is to think about what is the operating rhythm of your company, right? And different functions or different tasks may be done in different rhythms. For example, product development might be in a quarterly rhythm, whereas sales might be in a weekly rhythm, right? Then combining those 2 things with the same person often doesn't work, right? As human beings, we are much better at keeping ourselves aligned to one rhythm than to have multiple interleaving rhythms in our heads. So those are some of the considerations. But whichever method you choose, right? These metrics that you've drawn and the business model canvas that you've drawn at a company level must cascade seamlessly, right? So each of your direct reports, for example, should have 1 or 2 or 3 metrics that they are tracking, and there should be a clear linkage of those metrics to your company-wide metrics, right? It's possible that some metric just gets delegated down. Cost of customer acquisition can straight away go to your online marketing or acquisition team, right? So sometimes it will just flow down. But if not, that having that linkage clear is very important. And it often is a challenge in product and technology teams, right? Because which of these metrics do I give my product and technology team? Because the only metric they understand is you tell me the requirement, I'll deliver in 3 weeks' time. Okay. Honestly, we've internally done a lot of work to make sure that our product teams are now aligned to business outcome measures. And the degree of alignment that creates is just amazing, right? Because now your product manager is thinking about how do I increase LTV by CAC, for example, right? That is not a CEO's problem. That's a product management problem, right? And so he's not interested in developing one more feature. They're interested in diagnosing what lever will move this needle and hence be able to build that lever, right? So answering the why for each person, why are they doing what they're doing? What, right? They have 15 different projects to pursue. What should they do, right? And the measures around it, right, is an extremely important form of alignment. By and large, you want to leave people with this and let them figure out the how, right? You don't want to get into what are the 3 things you will do to accomplish this. If they have clarity on what is it that they're trying to accomplish, why are they going behind it, and how will we know whether we have accomplished it or not, then the details can be taken care of by individual teams.
Thank you, Mr. Alok. I think we're running out of time. We have a lot of founders asking questions, but more in terms of, what are modes and things like that, which would be taken on in subsequent sessions post this. I cannot thank you enough on behalf of all the participants. It has been an extremely insightful session and very, very engaging. the number of comments we've received, and we still continue to get a lot of founders have benefited from this session. So thank you once again for your time today.
Thanks so much, Kanchi. And I want to just thank all the attendees. I was dreading this session that I'll come here and I'll speak like a moron for 45 minutes. But thank you so much for making this interactive and making it fun for me. So thank you.
Thanks so much. So if the founders, to all the participants on the call, if you're looking to raise capital or you'd like to connect with Mr. Alok or have any other questions, please feel free to write to us. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave my email address in the chat box. Please feel free to write to us and I'll be more than happy to connect with Mr. Alok or answer your questions. We're looking forward. As you may know, this is a series of sessions. We do have a session every Friday. So the next session coming up next Friday is on 23rd of October, which is on building differentiated businesses. So our speaker is Mr. Anupam Saronwala, and he's going to be talking on how do you build a unique product, what is a moat, what are the different types of moats, how do you go ahead and create one at the early stage and maintain it as you scale your venture. So it is going to be quite an insightful session as well. So please do register. I'm going to put in the registration link in our chat box right now. Please sign up, and we're looking forward to hosting you next Friday, and have a wonderful weekend.